here.
So long, suckers!
Going nowhere.
Well, this just got a little weird.
So, there's only been one movie I've ever wanted to see. I'm not much of a hype man, but I got hyped for this one. This is the big film. This is the only good movie ever made. Films were a mistake. Everything that ever came out after Metropolis was a mistake. Everything that was released after Modern Times, that was the other good movie ever made. Until now. Now, movies have a purpose. We've actually made another good movie. And I'm shook. I don't know what to do. The trailer was incredible. The trailer had me hooked. Now, I saw the movie and I'm not disappointed. I'm just a little angry. This movie's kind of akin to Beastars or Zootopia or Bedfellows or Crow Job in Space. I might have a bias here. You all know it. I had this bias for Zootopia as well, where now I can kind of see that that wasn't a perfect movie. I overrated it at the time. Still a good movie. Still a movie I enjoyed. Still a movie I hold bias for, that I rate more highly than other people do. And that's because I do like anthropomorphic characters, and this movie has them. Snakes are good, therefore good movie. You don't get a lot of good snakes in movies. Just gonna say it. Snakes on a plane. Snakes weren't very good. You know, most movies don't even have snakes, you know? But yeah, I really liked Mr. Snake and Mr. Wolf. They had a really good dynamic. And I think the movie really understood that, because it focused mostly on their dynamic. They had a lot of scenes together. It was probably the two strongest characters, the two most interesting characters, and you get a lot of interactions between them. Of course, they try to shift it to other characters, but the other characters aren't really as good. They're fine. They do their job. The ensemble works. It does. It's just not incredible. The snake and the wolf really kind of steal the show. They really kind of carry it. It would be kind of a boring movie if you didn't have that, because yeah, I don't know. I'm just glad they realized that. I thought the snake was Danny DeVito for like most of the movie.
I'm going to give you a push pop.
Just for me!
No, to share.
This is gonna taste extra sweet.
Whoa, whoops, oh! I dropped my monster condom that I used for my Magnum Dong.
I'm out of here.
There were lots of twists and turns, which were also executed well, and it's kind of a nod to movies of this sort of genre. They're aping off of Ocean's 11, heist movies, various sorts of movies like those. And yeah, they use the tropes really well. There's a lot of ridiculous twists that sort of come out of nowhere, and they keep stacking on more and more layers to the twists, and every character kind of tries to one-up each other or succeeds in one-upping each other. And it's just insane by the end of it. And they took it so far that it became funny and absurd just in that regard. I guess we're gonna get into spoilers already. The antagonist lady, not that it's a very plot-driven movie. Well, she's a bit too antagonistic, I would say. Like, she's not really good from the beginning, or at least that was the vibe I was getting from the beginning. She's just kind of annoying at the beginning. Her whole shtick is just sort of berating the protagonist, and he just sort of takes it, and that's a bit of a gripe I have with the movie. It kind of makes sense. They have a sort of in-universe, like in-character reasoning and consistency for it, but I can't really take my brain away from the fact that it's like The Doylist reasoning is just for plot convenience, so a lot of the problems could be solved by the protagonist being more clear. He just sort of goes with it and allows it to happen with scenes. Sort of cheap, they could have done more. But they subverted a bit, because this antagonist lady is another crook, and I like that. I like that. I actually didn't see that coming. You expect certain twists in this movie, and they do all of them and a lot more. They do like all the twists everyone would come up with. So, yeah, it's kind of insane. Of course, Goody Two-Shoes ends up being a villain. He's the real villain. That's not too surprising, but they were pretty slick with setting up a really convincing ruse for the heroes to fall for. And they obviously do the whole thing where, like, oh no, they didn't actually do the crime, but everyone's going to treat them like they did, and everyone's going to be mean to them. I was wondering how they would do that, because this movie's plot is obviously ripe for that sort of thing. And they did it adequately. I was expecting more. After seeing it, I was like, I'm not sure how I would execute this. But then I saw it, and I was like, oh, okay, that's one way you could do it, but it felt like they could have done more once they got to that point, but they didn't really bother, it felt like. It felt like they made a superb trailer, and then when you watch the actual movie, those bits that are in the trailer don't hit as hard in the movie. They're specifically there for the trailer, and then in the movie they feel kind of out of place. They nod to the audience to sort of let you know that it's satire, it's meant to be a bit campy, it's sort of meant to be silly by overdoing things, you know, but they don't break the fourth wall, which I'm thankful for, because that was novel when Deadpool was doing it in that first movie. But every movie's been doing that, so it's stale at this point. I think this movie understands that it can be fresh by bringing back the old stuff. It feels like a very classic animated film. Even though it's in full 3D, it has that Spider-Verse sort of comic book style laid over top of it. It does look kind of too smooth at times. There were times where they lowered the frame rate. They animate in more stilted ways to get cartoony effects, and I wish they did that more, because I thought that just looked better. When they're moving about all smoothly at like 60 frames or 30 frames or whatever it was, I thought it looked kinda cheesy. And even when they're standing still, it feels like the movie's over-animated. Like they're too caught in the technology and like spectacle. Not saying that this movie is crazy in the special effects department. It's not that crazy of a budget for an animated movie these days, but they still do get caught in sort of this style over substance trapping, where I just kind of wish they'd focus on the writing a bit more and a bit less on making everything look pretty. And it's not uncanny, and the style is mostly good. I think this is one of the few areas where I might nitpick and other people find it fantastic. I don't know, it reminds me of like Jason FX's weird animations where they tween and stuff. I see all these vertexes and splines tweening and squishing all over the place when the characters are like standing still, and I'm just like, this is over animated. Why does this need to move around this much when they're like stationary characters in these scenes? But yeah, the The movie clearly has inspirations from Ocean's 11, mostly. I really like the driving sequences. Those were very good. And yeah, it's a fun movie overall. But if I didn't have my biases, I think I would have found it to be a much duller movie than I found it to be. If I wasn't enthralled with, like, these animal characters who really, like, brought fun to the movie. If they were just generic, cloudy with a chance of meatballs people, I probably wouldn't have liked this movie. But yeah, it is what it is. The pacing is kind of bad. It's hard to overlook the pacing. That's the main reason I don't want to overpraise this movie. It's kind of bizarre because it feels like half of the movie is paced properly and the other half is way too slow. It's a 100-minute movie, and it feels like it has the plot of a 70-minute movie. They wanted a movie that was sentimental, but they also wanted a movie that was fun action comedy for the whole family. And I think they nailed the latter bit. The first bit was fine, but it felt like it clashed with the other bit. It felt like two visions just butting into each other. Like you're trying to mix two soups together, but the Pawsey info keeps it separated, like Ben and Jerry's ice cream, where you have like one ice cream in the other ice cream. You have two separate ice creams. But I wanted them to mix, but somehow it just wasn't. It was one or the other at any given moment in the movie. It's not terrible. Overall, there's not really tonal whiplash. Even in the sentimental moments, it is still upbeat. It is still silly. It's just that those scenes tend to be a bit boring in comparison. They tend to linger. Like, the first heist was very fun. I feel like the movie excelled in comedy and action. It didn't really do the drama so well. That wasn't its focus, but also it felt like the writing was weaker in that department, where the jokes mostly landed, aside from the really annoying fart joke or whatever. They tie that into the plot, but that doesn't make it any better. It's almost like these movies have a checklist, and they're forced to put a dumb fart joke in just because it's a PG movie, I guess. So I didn't care much for that, but aside from that, most of the jokes are pretty funny. They're not that cringy unless they're supposed to be. Like with Shark pretending he's pregnant. That was a wild scene. It really tried, and I do admire that. The execution was really good in a lot of regards, but in terms of the writing and pacing, it just wasn't, unfortunately. Art style's beautiful. It's fun. It's stylish. It's fresh. It's funny. Even the sentimental bits are good, too. They don't get overly sappy, at least not often, but there are a bit too many of them. The movie needed to be trimmed a bit, I think. Or they needed more depth. They needed a plot that allowed more character growth, more time to be allotted rather than having filler. But again, it is trying to be a sort of crowd-pleasing kids movie. And unfortunately, success sometimes means just doing stuff that isn't artistically great. You know, it's like the fast food of writing films, writing stories. So unfortunately, yeah, I can't just say this is an excellent movie. I have to say it's objectively good, but subjectively incredible. I can't recommend this movie to everyone, but I really liked it. It was definitely a me type of movie. Really tailor-made for me. Anyway, we're on to the spoiler section. You know, Mr. Snake said I love you to Mr. Wolf, and I felt that. They played I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, and they cut it from the Chinese version. I'm not making that up. You don't have to Google it. You have to just take my word. Take my word. Just believe me. Why would I ever lie to you? Why would I? Why would a YouTuber? Why would someone on YouTube ever lie? Why would someone do that? Would someone go on the internet and just tell lies? But I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. What is this world coming to? No. Anyway, I would give it a score out of 1,000. It was definitely one of the movies ever made. I'd probably give it an 812. Why do I even script this? This is stupid. Why do I even bother? Oh yeah, there was a kid beside me in the theater who was on his phone the whole time. And he says to his mom, "Oh, this bit coming up's very good." And I was thinking, like, what kind of kid watches the same movie multiple times in theaters? How can you afford taking your kid to the same movie multiple times in theaters? I don't know. I don't understand kids, but then again, I don't watch movies more than once typically anyway. I like watching new things. I don't know. But he wasn't even watching the movie the second time, so he was just on his phone. I don't get why people bother. Oh yeah, there's this scene like in the climax of the movie where they're falling like off a cliff, and this girl shrieked at the top of her lungs, and this guy almost lost it laughing because this girl shrieked like so loud. That was pretty iconic, I must say. That girl was genuinely terrified of that scene, and I found that very amusing. It was sold out. It was so busy at the theater. Kind of crazy, but I'm glad I went. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of hope for this movie, and it didn't disappoint. I pretty much knew I'd enjoy this movie. It looked very fun from the trailers, and the trailer wasn't a complete lie. You know, it actually delivered, and I'm very glad for that. You know? It's a very, very fun movie. Very fun movie that you can take the whole family to, and you could have lots of fun and munch on popcorn and stuff. Oh yeah, people in the Furry Writers Guild Discord are not gonna like me saying this, but I'm glad that the anthropomorphic characters had a reason to be anthropomorphic characters in the first place. Like, I was discussing Sing and Sing 2 with someone who said they like those movies. I just have to say, if you like Sing, you know, good on you. You know, you're allowed to like movies. You know, I actually respect that. I wish I could get joy like that, but I'm just so dark and moody and depressing. I almost want every movie to just be sad, even if it's this one. I was complaining about the sentimental bits because it didn't have drama. I didn't even cry during this movie. It wasn't even morbidly depressing. It didn't make me have an existential crisis. It was like whimsical, and it had this childlike wonder to it. I don't know. I really couldn't tell you what that was about. There's also this weird fascination with like hurting Mr. Snake. He like gets his tail slammed in a briefcase. He gets like strangled multiple times. He gets his neck tied into like a knot at one point. Don't be tying knots in Mr. Snake's throat, you know. Only Mr. Wolf should do that. Mr. Wolf is a very good bad boy.
I'm a very good bad boy. I'm
A very good bad boy. A very good bad boy. Have a wonderful bidet. And thank you for joining me again on the very first episode of The Only Show ever made on the internet. You've all been gracious. I'd like to thank my mother. I'd like to thank our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. If I could just have a word with you for a minute about him, that would be great. This won't take much time. Just stay there. Just open the door. Let me in.